Good morning, and hey now, PASW staff, clients, and friends joining us. Welcome to Tuesday's class. We had a lot of fun yesterday looking at the Spielberg film E.T. for the film scoring assignment, which you're going to send to me by tomorrow, right? And we'll see the results on Friday. So, looking forward to that. Today we're going to be doing something different and talking about one of my favorite film composers. One of my favorite composers in general. Changed film music, changed movies, changed the world in some ways. We will be talking about the great composer Nino Rota. If you don't know the name, you will after this. Nino Rota is one of the most famous Italian composers, a pianist, a conductor, a teacher, wrote more than 150 film scores in Italy and all over the world from the 1930s until his death in 1979. And so if you think about that, that's an average of 3 film scores each year for 46 years. Truly a prodigy, and composed 10 operas, 5 ballets, and a dozen other chamber orchestral works, and had a long career as a teacher in Bari, where he was the music director for about 30 years. So we're going to look at his life and his music, and also his collaborations with directors, and including the most important collaboration in film history of the 20th century with Fellini. And we'll look at scenes from that and listen to his music and just enjoy it. We're going to really have a fun time watching and listening to the great music of Nino Rota and the films of Fellini. So sit back and relax, or sit up, and pay attention. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's look at Nino Rota. Nino Rota was born into a musical family. Everybody played an instrument, and his mom taught him when he was 8, had it all about music. Was born in 1911 in Milan. So as I like to do to get a context of the location and what's going on. Yesterday at E.T., they filmed that at Culver City Studios, right? MGM. So let's go there to Milan. Let's go to Italy. And if we think of the year 1911, something very important happened. 1911 is when we get the first feature film together, and that is by the very brilliant director D.W. Griffith. So he releases the first feature film. Now it's only 33 minutes, but back then that was a really long time. Now we have, feature films. Back then, mostly short films on reels, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So D.W. Griffith says, what if we start making stories and not just little gags, little reels of something? What if we actually start making stories where people are invested into the what's the drama of the characters? Although there's no sound, there's cards telling people what they're saying and what's going on. But he's the first filmmaker to create that feature-length movie, which of course is going to be very important to Nino Rota, because what he's famous for are film scores for feature-length movies. So D.W. Griffith does that with Enoch Arden, and that's a 33-minute movie where the reels are combined. So that's the big thing that happens that year that Nino Rota is born. So Nino Rota is a child prodigy. He writes his first oratorio, which is like a smallish opera. That's kind of what it is, at age 11, and starts studying at the Milan Conservatory and composition as well in Rome, and then goes to America for a few years and studies at the Curtis Institute in Philadelphia, which is still a very famous music conservatory. And there he meets George Gershwin, and they talk about jazz. And this is the 30s, where jazz is kind of really coming to jazz and classical music. Stravinsky and other composers, they're using elements of jazz into their compositions. Nino Rota studied conducting, and then he actually earned a degree in literature from the University of Milan. He was a real intellectual, and graduated in 1937, and then began his teaching career in Bari. And he taught all of his life. He loved teaching. And then in the 50s, he starts getting into film music, and in 1952 he starts his famous collaboration with Fellini, and Fellini we'll talk about a little bit later. I mean, he changed cinema, not even Italian cinema, but cinema forever. So from 1950 to when he dies in 1979, he writes almost all scores for Fellini's films, which changed the world. Aside from Fellini, he collaborates with Zeffirelli, including his famous version of Romeo and Juliet. And then Francis Ford Coppola, the Italian-American born director, taps him to do his score for The Godfather. And Nino Rota received the Academy Award for Best Original Score for Godfather II. So even if you haven't seen The Godfather, of course, this music and these images are so iconic. I mean, just not even in film history, but just in history in general.
Don Corleone.
So as we're listening to this, I mean, let's just talk about his musical characteristics. His soundtracks are really, well, they were reminiscent of his heritage. It sounds like Italian music. It's rich, it's romantic, it's full of these of melancholy. There's waltzes, there's elegance, and I think what I love about it is there's a lot of humor in his music. He's probably influenced me more than any composer. I've talked about composers a lot in this class who I love, and Stravinsky and Philip Glass and all of these people. Probably unconsciously, I started writing like Nino Rota before I really knew Nino Rota. I discovered Nino Rota when I was probably in 11th grade, and that's when I started writing music, but I can probably a little bit before that. I remember writing polkas and tangos, which came out of, I don't know where it came out of, maybe music my parents played in the house, probably. But I don't know. I've probably connected more to Nino Rota than any other composer, and not because out of any conscious decision. Just it's, I guess somehow there's a little Italian composer in my mind that tells me to write funny, quirky, whimsical, romantic music, and that's what I love so much about his music. There's a lot of humor in it, and a lot of nostalgia, and a lot of curiosity. As we hear this, there's a lot of curiosity in music. There's different moods and directions. It's not just one type of thing, and that's what makes his film music so interesting to me, and that's what Fellini liked about it. So like Spielberg and John Williams, director and composer. Like Hitchcock and Bernard Herrmann, director and composer. We have Fellini and Nino Rota, director and composer, and this is one of the most famous collaborations in the 20th century. Fellini changed the cinema forever. And even if you don't like his movies or don't know his movies, his influence is huge. And Fellini and Rota had such a brilliant, close collaboration, and they were close friends. And he referred to Rota as the most precious collaborator I've ever had. And when we see some of Fellini's scenes, the music and the imagery goes along so beautifully. It's hard to imagine one without the other. And I don't know if I love Rota's music because of Fellini's images, or do I love Fellini because of Nino Rota's music. It's very hard. There's a sense of dreamlike images in Fellini's films, just like there are when you hear some of Nino Rota's music. Fellini was really influenced by Carl Jung and would create a lot of dreamlike, fantasy-like things in his movies that kind of had this curious tone. And like I said, Nino Rota captured that. And he didn't really have to see Fellini films in the beginning to get ideas. So he would come over and he would play ideas for Fellini on the piano. Fellini would go shoot the movie. And I guess it was famous that Nino Rota would fall asleep during these screenings after, because he didn't understand what was going on at all, and until after he finished the score. So we're going to talk about and look at more Nino Rota and Fellini tomorrow, because I just like to keep some of these short, so we keep the attention span going. We're going to have a lot of fun. So have a great rest of the day, and join me tomorrow for Nino Rota Part 2. Okay, bye.